about pitching yourself. We have on a lot of great guests. We're going to go through the Show Me the Data section. That's what we start everything with because we're PhDs. We want to see the data, right? Why is this stuff important? If you've been struggling in your job search to get hired, guess what? You are not alone, okay? You're not alone. So we're gonna jump in here very soon with the Show Me the Data section. We go through that. Then we're gonna bring on our guest, Bill McGowan. He's a two-time Emmy Award-winning journalist. Amazing guest to bring on. He wrote this book, Pitch Perfect, not the movie, Pitch Perfect, How to Say It Right the First Time, Every Time. So you can see that there. I'll show this to our members over here, our friends over on YouTube. We're gonna be talking about his book. We're gonna be talking about the principles of pitching yourself, right? Why does this matter? Because when you go to a networking event, you're gonna hear questions like, tell me a little bit about yourself. You're gonna hear that when you interview too. You're gonna hear that during informational interviews. By the way, if you want to learn more about informational interviews, maybe you've never heard that phrase, or you've heard of it, you don't really know what it is, how to execute one, how to set one up, what questions to ask. What you're seeing on your screen is our brand new ebook. I really like the colors. I don't know, purple. We haven't done anything with purple yet. So if you're watching us streaming on Facebook, you'll be able to see this. You can kind of see it over here on YouTube. Members, you can see it over here. Make sure you get this ebook. We put the link in there. It's just cheekyscientist.com/informational-interviews. So we are about to start the radio show. We have 7 minutes till the top of the hour. If you're catching us now, you're catching us on our pre-show. Our pre-show time here, we start about 10 to 15 minutes early. Who do we have on today? We have on Bill McGowan. Bill McGowan is a two-time Emmy Award-winning journalist. He's been on ABC News 2020, CBS News 48 Hours, Dow Jones Television, MSNBC, and a lot more. He's worked with some names you probably heard of. Eli Manning, football player, U.S. football. Sheryl Sandberg, Jack Welch, right? Huge business names. Mary J. Blige, Carly Kloss, NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell, and CEOs of Facebook, Airbnb, Snapchat, Coach, Spotify, Calvin Klein, Lyft, Sesame Street. Fantastic guest. We're really lucky to have him on. Has a great book called Pitch Perfect. We'll talk more about that when we bring him on. We also have on Tapan Shah, who is in a scientist position, got his PhD in biochemistry and molecular biology. We're going to have on Patricia Silva as well, who recently got into a consultant position. She's a great guest, and we'll be talking to her about her transition. We'll be talking to Tapan about his transition as well. So very excited for today's show. We always start with the Show Me the Data section, so we're going to be getting started there very soon. I see a lot more people joining here as we get closer to the top of the hour. Ambreen, hello. Amy Anant, Andrea, Baharathi, Camille, Erica, Heidi, Joanna, hello. Nalish, Pisu, Sarah, Zach, Zia. Good to see all of you on. Let me see who we have streaming on Facebook here on YouTube. So we're getting started here. If you're just joining us, we have about 5 more minutes until the top of the hour. For those of you who are associates who are joining us in Zoom, how are all of you doing? Any new members on with us today? We just had an enrollment, so I'm curious, are there any new members on with us here today? Let me know in the chat box. Let me know in the chat box. Any new members on yet? A few of you are new. Good to see you. Hello. Hi, Lisa. Hi, Mary. Zach, first radio show. How many of you is this your very first radio show? For those of you who are new members, first radio show. We will be getting started in 4 minutes. 4 minutes. We're going to go through this great Show Me the Data section. I'm just going to scroll through it real quickly here. This is coming up. Before we start, I'm going to remove this once we start, but before we start, I'll talk about it briefly after we start. There's a complete guide to informational interviews ebook that you can download, so make sure you check that out. First radio show for Zach, first radio show. Some of you, how many of you is this your third or more radio show showing up to live? Third or more radio show. Third or more. A couple of you. Third or more, Morose and Kit. Great, Mary. Thanks, Mary. So Mary is our lead producer. She'll be joining us a little bit later for the members only section. We'll be talking about LinkedIn. I'll tell you, the radio show has come a long way. When we first started, I think it was 3 months ago. What did we say, Mary? How many shows have we done now live? Live shows was like 20? 20 some?
This is our 49th podcast, and it's we're approaching 30. I want to say for radio shows. We started in April.
49 podcasts. So in April, it's been a long time coming, but it's worth it because we have a lot of incredible guests lined up. Obviously, Bill McGowan today, two-time Emmy Award winner, who's going to talk to you about pitching yourself to employers and beyond. But we have some great guests coming up. I don't want to spoil it, but we have lined up some New York Times bestsellers. We have lined up some people who write about high-level business concepts, some about wealth management, some about stocks. Who else do we have? We have people coming on that are going to talk about kind of the behavioral psychology of getting ahead in business. Some big names. I'm not going to spoil it yet, but stay tuned.
We have an Olympian as well.
An Olympian coming up, yeah, like a 2-3-time Olympian? Four-time Olympian. 4 times. See how I anchored low there, and then it was actually 4. So if I would have said 10 times and she said 4, it wouldn't have sounded as impressive. But 4-time Olympian. I'm pretty sure if you are a 1-time Olympian, it's impressive. But we have a lot of great guests lined up. If you're just joining us, we're about to get started with the Cheeky Scientist radio show. We have on 2-time Emmy Award winner Bill McGowan. We have on some PhDs who transitioned recently into jobs. They're going to talk about their challenges. We're going to start with the Show Me the Data section. And before we get started, you can get this new free ebook on informational interviews. This is an incredible ebook that our team put together. I want to say special thanks to Jeanette, special thanks to Kathy for putting this together. You've got to check out this ebook. It's incredible. I think it's our best ebook by far. The figures are the best. I don't know. I like the figures, and the color, it just pops. Looks great. Check out this ebook. You can download it now. We'll put the links in Zoom. We'll put the links on Facebook. We're 1 minute away from going live. See a lot of our members here. Dion, hello. Ruchira, hello. Jessica, good to see you on. Rimley, Nitty, Udi, hello. Good to see you. Robbie Habel, hello. You've got to check out Robbie Habel's Nature article if you haven't yet. Great guy, great story. Avanti, Deepak, Hoda, Jessica, Brian, Himanshu, Nirakara, Ramya, Yogesh, hi Ramya, Samuel, Elisa, Nicholas. Wow, lots of members over here. Dipti, good to see you on. 1 minute away. Very excited to start the Cheeky Scientist radio show. We have 2-time Emmy Award winner Bill McGowan on. Tapan, Patricia, lots of great guests, PhDs who have transitioned. We're going to be talking about pitching. We're going to talk about the skills you need to get hired in industry. And if you're joining us on YouTube, hello to you too. Great to have you on. Please let us know if you have any questions or comments in the comment boxes. We will get to them. If not live, we will get to them after. And it's time to go. Is the audio still there? Is it? All right, we're going to change the audio here, and then we're going to get started because we are at the top. I think it's coming through. No, it's not changing. It must just be from this.
Interesting.
And we are live. Welcome to another Cheeky Scientist radio show. I am Isaiah Henkel with Cheeky Scientist, and I'm very excited about today's show. Thank you all for joining. What are we going to go through today? We're going to go through the Show Me the Data section where I'm going to show you why work ethic is not the most important thing to employers. It's hard for me to even say or acknowledge that. I'll tell you why, but it's true. It's actually communication skills, integrity, responsibility, owning your projects and mistakes. We're going to go through that data. We're going to talk a lot about pitching yourself today. That's our main theme, pitching yourself as a PhD, okay, to employers or otherwise. We have a great guest, Bill McGowan. He's the author of this book, Pitch Perfect, 2-time Emmy Award-winning journalist. Just an amazing guest to have on with us. We also have on Tapan Shah and Patricia Silva, who transitioned recently into jobs as PhDs. They had a lot of the technical challenges in terms of their job search and emotional challenges that you likely had. I want to bring on our team to say thank you to our team here in just 1 second, but this is your last chance. If you can see the image on the screen, this is our brand new ebook, A Complete Guide to Informational Interviews. A lot of work went into this ebook. Great information, great data, great specific practical things to follow in terms of how to set up an informational interview, how to pitch one to an employee working at a company. and how to actually execute it. So what questions to ask. If you click on the link in the Zoom chat, we'll put the links on YouTube and on Facebook, wherever you're watching us. Check out this ebook. You can, of course, just go to the URL here, cheekyscientist.com/informational-interviews. Get that. We're going to go to the Show Me the Data section here very shortly. But I want to bring on our team who helped make this radio show possible. First, I'll bring on Mary. Hi, Mary. How are you today?
Hi, Isaiah. I'm great. I'm really excited for today's show.
Great to see you on. Mary, please say hi to Mary in the chat box. Say hi to Mary wherever you're seeing her. Mary is our lead producer for the radio show, has done a lot of the organizational stuff here, and is a great communicator, much better than me, which is why she excels at being the lead producer. So really great to have her on. Please thank her in the chat box. We also have on Lisa. Lisa, I don't know if you knew I was going to bring you on live, but I just asked you to start your video. So we'll try to unmute you and bring you on too, but we also have on Jeanette with us. And I want to say thank you to both of them for making this possible. Hi, Jeanette. How are you?
Hello. Good. How are you?
Great. Great bow tie, as usual. Jeanette will be coming on with us very soon for the Show Me the Data section. So please say hi to Jeanette. Lots of great data to go through. And if we can get Lisa on later, we'll bring Lisa on too. But we have Lisa helping out in the chat box. So please say hi to Lisa too. And we are going to jump in here very soon. So today it's in line with something that we talk about a lot, right? As PhDs, you have the technical skills that you need, right? You are very intellectually sound, if not, you accelerate intellectually in terms of talking about technical details, the logic, work ethic, autonomy, all this stuff. But whereas PhDs, we haven't had a lot of behavioral practice is in the terms of communication skills. Some of the softer skills are transferable skills. We have them, but we're not used to talking about them. We're certainly not used to pitching them to employers or other people, right? How you carry yourself, your presentation, all of these different things, they really matter. That's why we have our special guest on, Bill McGowan, today, who will be bringing on after the Show Me the Data section. We'll be talking about his book, Pitch Perfect. He is a 2-time Emmy Award winner. We also have on PhDs who transitioned into industry. A lot of great stuff happening today. I'm going to go to Show Me the Data. Mary, is that okay? I'm not forgetting anything? Permission? All right, she's giving me the thumbs up. So let me share my screen here. We have some great figures to go through in terms of the Show Me the Data section. I'm just going to move a couple of things around on my screen. If you can type in yes into the chat box, if you're one of our members joining us on Zoom, if you can see my screen, please type in yes. All right, looks like we can all see. Jeanette, you're on with me?
Yep, I'm here.
All right, so I've zoomed in here, maybe a little too much, but we'll try it. So this is the Show Me the Data section. This first topic is on executive perceptions of the top 10 soft skills needed in today's workplace. And we will put the links in the post show notes. We'll put them in a blog article coming out after the radio show. We'll also put them in the chat box now. This is from journals.sagepub.com. And the table that we're looking at is perceived level of importance of each soft skill attributed in the workplace. So the sample size is 57 here. What I like about this is it shows what's really important to employers and to colleagues rather than sometimes what we think is important as PhDs. Personally, the bottom thing on the list here, work ethic, as a PhD, we just value that. I'm not saying work ethic is not important as we're going to go through this figure, but it's great to see what is placed above it in terms of priority of importance, right? So very quickly, Jeanette, I'm just going to break down the figure for those people listening to us by audio only. We have on the list from top to bottom, from most important to least important, and we'll walk through how they measure this data. Integrity is first, communication second, courtesy, responsibility, interpersonal skills, professionalism, positive attitude, teamwork skills, flexibility, and then work ethic at the bottom. So, Jeanette, how do they come up with this data, and what do all of these different columns mean, right? So we have, 5 columns: not important, not very important, somewhat important, very important, extremely important.
Yeah. So they got this data by surveying some executive leaders in business, and then they asked them what they felt the importance of these skills are in a young new hire that they brought on.
Yes.
And they then rated it as not important, very important, somewhat important, extremely important. And you can see the best way to sort of look at this figure is if you look at the very right-hand column under extremely important, you can see what skills they thought were the most often were extremely important. And you can see that integrity and communication are right at the top of the list, as 93% of employers said that integrity is extremely important, and 91% said that communication is extremely important.
Yeah, and this is fascinating. Let's just take the top 4, because I think the top 4, there's really just 2 groups there, right? So out of the top 4, it's integrity, communication, courtesy, responsibility. So integrity and responsibility are the same thing. And I think, what we call it, at least the cheeky scientist, is like ownership. Like if you make a mistake, you say, hey, this is a mistake that I made, here's how I'm going to solve it, right? Instead of kind of punting the blame to somebody else. That's a big part of integrity, responsibility. Also, not lying, being honest in terms of something didn't work out, just own it. We learned this as a PhD. I think one of the most important lessons that I learned in graduate school is to say, I don't know when I actually don't know. Like, we have a hard time with that as a PhD, right? We learn this in front of our thesis committee. We're getting grilled on something, and sometimes you just have to say, I don't know, or it's not known, right, Jeanette? So what's your take on integrity and responsibility?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously very important, and I think as PhDs, you're right, we really know how to own what we've done and what we haven't done, and I think the rigor of that intensity of being grilled is you really have to realize, like, this is my responsibility to make sure this is right.
Yeah.
Right,
Exactly.
and I think that a lot of people don't have that skill, so it's important to be able to play that up as something that you really have as a PhD.
Right, and this is something that is important for today's entire theme, right? If you have to pitch yourself, you have to carry yourself a certain way with a certain level of confidence, a certain level of ownership, self-efficacy. We're going to touch on those things, clearly important. The other group there is communication and courtesy, right? So really those could go hand in hand, like communicating effectively, communicating politely. It's very, very important. I was surprised to see this. I mean, communication is important, but to see it so much, so highly above work ethic or even team working skills, etc., was kind of a surprise, right? I think this might be a shock to some PhDs. What do you think, Jeanette?
Yeah, I think maybe it is a bit shocking, right, to realize that it's how you talk about what you've done is more important than what you've done.
Yes.
How you were able to convey that to your boss, to your peers, whoever, is more important, because if you've done something amazing, but no one can really understand what you're talking about, or you don't convey it in a way that is impactful and recognizes that you've done something amazing, then it's not going to work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is such a difficult thing for a lot of PhDs to realize, because as PhDs we work by ourselves a lot, and so you place a big importance on what you do a lot of, right? So your way you just naturally self-justify without even knowing it. So we think work ethic, autonomy, right? Hitting deadlines, results, collecting the data is the most important thing. No, that's just what you do the most. When you start working with larger and larger teams, it's not like the results aren't important, but it becomes less about the result in terms of the overall spectrum and more about communication. Like getting the results, that's like 5%. If you can't communicate the results effectively or rally people to your side, right, to execute on those results or to respond to that feedback, right? If you can't pitch what the next move is, which again is communication, then you are in trouble. And this happens to me all the time. Like I had somebody say, when I first started working with the team, I was not very good at it. And they said, basically you run off of a cliff, and then you try to figure out how to build wings on the way down, and you expect everybody else to know that you need wings, right? And I think this is a lot of us as PhDs, like we live inside of our heads. We have a great vision. We know exactly what we need to do, and we're like, how do you not know what the vision is here? It's like, oh, you haven't communicated it. Or you've spent like this much time communicating it. And it's people who over communicate in terms of the definition that a PhD would give that are effective in business. So you might hate the fact that you're saying the same thing for the 15th time in a slightly different way so that everybody can understand just a bit better. That's really what it is. That's the most simplest way I can explain it. So great stuff there. Let's move on. The next figure, the title is Improved Communication Improves Productivity. So you might hear this, it might seem like common sense, but we want to see the data, and that's what we're doing here. So this is a McKinsey & Company study, and the result says improved communication and collaboration through social technologies in particular, like the technologies you'll use to manage projects in industry. We'll talk about that in a minute. These things could raise the productivity of interactions between workers by 20 to 25%. So real quick, Jeanette, I'm just going to break down what we have here on the x-axis side of this table and then in the column. So we have reading and answering emails, searching and gathering information, communicating and collaborating internally, and then role-specific tasks. Now, first of all, it's amazing that these are the 4 sections that McKinsey & Company is breaking up, like what you do at work, right? This will really help you understand what you do now in a much more general sense. Reading and answering emails, so basically correspondence, searching for and gathering information. That's probably like 90% for most of you if you're a PhD. Communicating and collaborating internally. This, what you'll do a lot of this in industry, and then role-specific tasks. Those can be considered your technical tasks. Okay, and then on the columns above it breaks down to percentage of the average work week that you spend during this. It has interaction in terms of workers' tasks, increased value-added time, again through using these project management like social technologies, and then the final column is productivity improvement in terms of a percentage. So Jeanette, can you give us the overall takeaway, and then we can break it down a bit?
Yeah, of course. So the overall takeaway is that this study looked at if you introduce a technology, a social technology that allows coworkers to communicate better and more effectively, they save time in each of these areas.
Yes.
And so you see that increased value added time is the percentage of time that they got back by not having to struggle through communicating with one another. And then the far right column shows the productivity improvement that amount of time gave to them.
Absolutely. And so this is why we talk so much about company culture, which is not just, having Hawaiian shirt day at the office. Okay, it's not just what you wear. It's the processes that you use to communicate as well. So some companies, they'll call each other between offices. Some companies will use project management softwares like Slack or Trello or Monday. We use Monday. And that's not an endorsement, but I'm just saying there's so many different project management software platforms out there, and as a PhD, you probably don't realize what they are. A huge part of your success is how quickly you learn to use that software package, and as PhDs, right, we talk about speed of learning, huge advantage you have. Leverage that when you're applying for a job. But these things matter, and so here's some data you can show. Be like, look, I am the fastest learner by the definition of my degree. I'm a doctor of philosophy, which means I'm the doctor of knowledge and the ability to ascertain knowledge. I'm a doctor of learning. Learning is crucial when it comes to uptaking new software programs. This is what employers are looking for. So if you can pitch the fact that you can learn software programs like this very, very quickly, they know it's valuable. And just, the results here, Jeanette, are what? We're not talking small numbers. We're talking in some cases, right, for like searching and gathering information, they were able to recoup 30 to 35% of their time by using the right social technology tool, correct?
Yeah,
Was
that's
this surprising
exactly right.
to you?
No, because I know how much time I've wasted looking for things in the past.
Yes.
Where you're like, I know I wrote that email to someone 3 weeks ago. Where is it?
Yes.
So that kind of stuff it's a time suck. Yeah.
It's huge. And again, just to use kind of our team as an example, and I think a lot of smaller companies end up passing documents back and forth to each other, where we started using Google Drive documents for everything, like just these big lists on Google Drive, and people would share it. And you think like, okay, everything else is going to be fairly similar to this, but then we move to a more advanced project management software system, and we've been able to get organized much, much better. And a lot of you as PhDs, you don't know what's out there. I know I was using Excel spreadsheets. That was it, right? Like sometimes you're printing off stuff from a machine that's been around since the 1980s, and you're keeping like the hard copies. I mean, you're a bit behind the times in terms of leveraging new networks and technology networks and software platforms. That's why we're bringing this up, because it is a crucial to you in terms of your productivity.
Can I add one more thing? I think
Yes.
we just sort of highlighted that project management is communication.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of times that doesn't really get translated, but it is. It's not just being organized, right? It's being able to communicate really well.
Yeah, great point, right? And
Yeah.
project management in industry, it's communicating budgets, communicating timelines, communicating the actual project, coordinating all these cross-functional relationships that rely on, you guessed it, communication. So let's get through a couple more if we can. This is a simple infographic, but I think it illustrates an important point. The title is Organizations That Communicate Better Are More Effective, right? This is from towerswatson.com. So what it's showing is that highly effective firms significantly outperform their peers. Duh, but Jeanette, that's the hidden point here. Break this data down for us.
Yeah, so this data is showing that when they looked at, they had a range of companies and they broke them out into the highly effective and the low effectiveness, and that was based on their performance financially. So the highly effective companies are those that performed really well financially. And when they surveyed people who worked at those companies, 22% of them agreed that their company was excellent at communication, whereas those that were really low performing, only 6% of employees thought that they were good at communicating in their company.
Right. So, managing change, being effective when you have to implement something new. Right. This is known as change management, and relies on communication. So communication, change management, that's what they were really looking at here. And what it showed is that people who are more effective in that sense, they are so because they communicate better, because they manage change better. And a lot of that has to do with, again, communication, pitching yourself, these topics that we're going to discuss today. We have time for one more figure. The title is Communication Apprehension, a barrier to students' leadership, adaptability, and multicultural appreciation. So this is from a semantics scholar, and we're looking at a table here, and it shows the mean, standard deviations. Is this Cronbach's alphas? That's a mathematical phrase. I have no idea what that means. But maybe Jeanette does. And correlations among variables. So we're looking at a sample size of 263. At the top, we have communication apprehension, and then number 2 is honor student. Number 3, general self-efficacy. 4, extroversion, agreeableness. So all of these different traits, Jeanette, but what are we really looking at here?
So this is, yeah, like you said, it's kind of a complicated figure, but what I really like to focus on is the correlations that they've drawn. So if you look at the very top, you see communication apprehension, right? And if you look at that number 1 column down,
Yes.
so that is the correlation between communication apprehension and each of those traits. So if we look at, we can see that communication apprehension, and if we look at general self-efficacy, and self-efficacy, it just means self-confidence.
Yes.
I didn't know what that word meant. I had to look it up, and I was like, oh, it just means confidence.
Fancy word.
It means confidence, and you can see that it's negative 0.5, right? So that means that if you are apprehensive about communicating, you aren't good at it, it scares you, you appear to lack self-confidence. Those two things are correlated,
Yes.
is what this data is showing.
This is great. And then,
yeah.
keep going, please, to the other two.
Yeah,
the other
so
two.
and the other ones I'd like to highlight is the leadership initiative one. So the same thing, it's the same negative 0.5. So when you are apprehensive about communicating, you lack leadership initiative. And that means your potential to be a leader is seen to be limited.
Yes.
And then the same thing with adaptability, where it's, you're not very adaptable if you aren't able to communicate well.
Yeah, so let me be blunt here. If you don't communicate well and take this seriously, and it's really only something that you can improve upon behaviorally, you can't read a book about how to communicate better and then all of a sudden think that you're just going to show up and be an excellent networker, communicator, be excellent at pitching yourself. You have to practice it. If you can't communicate well, you are going to be seen as insecure. If you cannot communicate well, you're going to be seen as not leadership material. If you cannot communicate well, you're going to be seen as not adaptable, that you can't learn, you can't adapt. You are, in short, not industry material, okay? Communication is crucial. I think that's a great note to end on. Thank you, Jeanette, for your time. Please thank Jeanette in the chat box. Fascinating data to go through. Really, really enjoy going through a lot of this data with you, because we tend to focus a lot on the transferable side, because as PhDs, you have the technical side down. You have to start mastering these technical skills. You have to understand that they are important. Okay, so our first guest is Bill McGowan. Very excited to have him on. He's the founder and CEO of Clarity Media Group. He's accomplished a lot, so I'm going to go through his bio here because it's all very, very important. He is a 2-time Emmy Award-winning journalist who has produced and reported for ABC News 2020, CBS News 48 Hours, Dow Jones Television, and MSNBC. He has anchored hundreds of hours of news and information programming, has conducted thousands of interviews with newsmakers, CEOs, celebrities, doctors. A lot of you in the group, we were talking about this week. Lots of excitement to have him on. He's talked to book authors, attorneys, and professional athletes. He now uses his experience to coach clients, to exude more confidence, right? To command, whether it's in television or an audience, for all of you in front of employers, any group of people that you need to communicate effectively with, pitch effectively with. He has trained people that you have likely heard of: Eli Manning, Sheryl Sandberg, Jack Welch, Mary J. Blige, Carly Kloss, NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell, the CEOs of Facebook, Airbnb, Snapchat, Coach, Spotify, Calvin Klein, Lyft, Sesame Workshop, Whole Foods, I love Whole Foods, and many more. So he gets clients ready by sharing his insights into the distinctive styles and tactics of different interviewers. Interviewing is not something that's easy, right? You might think, Isaiah, you're an incredible interviewer. You're a natural. No, I was even worse than I am now, and I'm sure that Bill's going to have some great tips for me. He is the expert in this field. He's provided sound strategies on handling crisis situations. He is also a resource for Clarity Media Group in terms of of handling crisis situations. He's also an expert in public speaking, has prepared numerous clients for TED Talks, Matrix Awards, acceptance speeches, major university commencement addresses, and corporate shareholder meetings. As part of his coaching, he helps clients find their authentic narrative and then teaches the necessary skills to enable them to deliver it with passion and persuasiveness. He is the author of this book I've been showing all week, Pitch Perfect. Great book, Pitch Perfect, how to say it right the first time every time. So there it is on YouTube and in our private members group. Great book. Bill, thank you for being on with us. It is an honor. I appreciate it.
Isaiah, thanks very much for having me. It's great to be here.
So I just showed the book, and I really would like to start there, and I wanted to start with the why. Why did you write this book?
Interestingly, after these one-on-one coaching sessions that I would do with clients, many times I was asked, well, what kind of materials are out there that you feel I could read or just to continue this process, because I realize it's not a one and done type of scenario. And I never really felt like there was a book out there that I felt 100% supportive of recommending as a resource. And I thought, yeah, I think it's about time I write one myself. So I sat down and I tried to make it more than just a situation where you're getting strategies around media interviews or big presentations. I wanted to focus on every single time you open your mouth in a fairly high stakes situation. That could be attending a meeting, giving a report to your superior at the office, how to talk up your boss at a cocktail party, how to talk when you meet your future in-laws, any kind of situation where there's a lot riding on you performing well and articulating yourself in a certain way.
Fantastic. Yeah, and so I think, that goes right to the benefits, which is what I was going to ask about too. I mean, you read this book and you really walk away with a sense of how to carry yourself well in any high-stakes situation, whether it's, standing in front of a decision maker for the big job that you want. You're standing in front of, in our personal relationships, meeting your in-laws, like you said. So I think that's fantastic. And, you share a lot of your personal stories and the things that you've been through in the book. And I'm curious if anything comes to mind, in the realm of that first time where you have kind of a high stakes situation where you're like, okay, this is real. I'm an adult now. I'm a professional. I got to stand up in front of somebody and carry myself and show that I can play, with the high level decision makers. What are some of the first things that you should focus on, or things that you tell someone who's never been in that situation before?
I'm amazed at how many people go into these situations without a game plan for the first 2 or 3 sentences that come out of their mouth. They might have a very firm idea of what the official beginning of their pitch is, or the official beginning of the presentation, but there's this gap of getting up to cruising altitude that a lot of people leave completely to spontaneity. The first thing that pops into their head. And in my mind, that's a crucial mistake, because the first 8 to 10 seconds are absolutely vital. You have to nail those first 2 sentences, or people make a dozen value judgments about you. Are you worth listening to? Do you have credibility? Do you know your stuff? And I find people get off to a very bumpy start because they're not going according to a game plan. And it means even knowing what that little small talk might be. I was just in London doing a whole series of trainings, and the people over there said, the first minute that you meet people, it's always about the weather. Everybody's talking about the weather. And how do you get from the weather, how do you get people engaged in what you're there to talk about? I said, well, you actually need some kind of segue line where this is going to be the little small talk. You need to think that through ahead of time. How do I transition and segue from that small talk banter about the weather into something that gets me started on what I'm there to talk about? That should not be left to chance.
Yeah.
If you really, really want to be good at this.
No, and just for a lot of our listeners, one thing that we've talked about where it gets that specific, the level of specificity that Bill's talking about, is even your response to "How are you doing today?" And we've seen behavioral psychology studies that say saying the word "perfect" is a great way to respond to that. But a lot of people might just say whatever pops into their head, "Oh, pretty good," or XYZ or whatever. But if you have a game plan for every little thing like that, you're saying it's going to go more smoothly, throughout the entire conversation.
Definitely. And I think one of the biggest mistakes you can make is responding to that question with some kind of griping about, well, the subway this morning, oh my God, it was so crowded. Nobody wants to hear that.
Yeah.
How you doing today is not really meant for a detailed negative response.
Absolutely.
It's meant for doing great. Looking forward to our chat today. And to get now into your enthusiasm for what you're there to do with this person or in front of an audience.
Yeah, and because you brought up your audience, one thing we're constantly talking about is, when you communicate, there's, your purpose, but the other side of the coin is your audience. So how do you balance getting your purpose across, your game plan, like you said, with responding to things that happen by chance because you're dealing with another person that could just bring up whatever? Maybe they had a horrible day. So how do you kind of balance that as you're pitching?
I often recommend to clients when they have to present to 15 or more people, there's sometimes a social component before you have to get up and speak. It could be breakfast off to the side or a couple of coffee urns. And rather than go off by yourself and obsess about how you're going to do and get all tight and nervous, I often tell people, go around and have as many 60-second conversations as you can with people. Take the pulse of the room. And that accomplishes two things. One, it now no longer makes the people in the audience strangers to you. They're now familiar faces, and because they've met you, they're probably going to be invested in being better listeners. That means smiling, nodding, giving you that positive reinforcement when you're standing up there. They're probably not going to pull out their phone and start, doing that as you're speaking, which is a total confidence killer. But it also helps you take the pulse of the room, where maybe somebody says something to you over that cup of coffee and you realize that's a great way to start. Maybe I can now give it this feeling of spontaneity by saying, I was talking to John as we were having coffee before we started, and he said something really interesting, and it made me realize that's really at the heart of what I want to share with you today. So as long as you feel confident making that a last minute addition at the top, it has a real great effect of pulling the crowd to you, and now you're talking with them instead of at them.
Yeah, perfect for this audience. So think about it, and we've talked about this. When you go to an interview, very often, especially for PhD level interviews, you're going to give a talk, and it's right around that 15 people usually in the audience number. Instead of obsessing over your PowerPoint slides, getting in front of the computer, acting like you're getting it all set up, you're not. Go out there and talk to everybody who starts sitting down and get to know them, and you'll hear from them, what their experience level is, right? Maybe you can adjust it, make it a little bit more informal, a little bit less data heavy, etc. You can adapt like that, and it goes a long way. It's knowing the pulse of the room, like Bill just said.
And knowing your audience.
Yes.
I feel like with PhDs and academics, scientists, mathematicians, whatever, and we train a lot of them because many of them have written books. So many of them come across our path, and I find that one of the biggest drawbacks, one of the biggest pitfalls for them is the curse of knowledge, where they know their material backwards and forwards, and they make certain assumptions that their audience does as well. And the next thing you know, they're throwing around acronyms or jargon or very granular, detailed type of terminology that just, goes right over the head of the audience. And once you get into that mode, the audience really never catches back up with you. So I think empathy is a big component of good communications. You have to understand, what is this audience, what can I reasonably assume they know? And what do they want to leave here with in terms of my message or in terms of my guidance? And really try to put yourself in the shoes of the audience. Get yourself out of this bubble of, this is what I prepared, this is my material, this is my thesis, and understand what's the value I'm bringing to what I'm saying.
Perfect. Yeah, and so for all of you, you're hearing this at the highest level. You will get inside your heads if you focus on what you know, the acronyms, the jargon. You're going to lose your audience. You got to meet them at their level, and that starts with knowing who they are. I'm really, really glad you brought that up, Bill. So, okay, let's stick with academics for a bit here. Let's say you're trying to help somebody that's like me in 2009. horrible in front of people. Like I was having panic attacks when I was starting to prepare. I was getting my first job as an application scientist. You stand and give a lot of presentations, right? It was a lot because as PhDs, we usually hide behind a podium, stare at the screen with a bunch of data, click, 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 and bury the lead, and that's it. How would you start to train me to be a more effective communicator, especially in terms of confidence, especially in terms of the way that I carry myself? What things help? Like if you started at the biggest chunks and then drilled down, what would that look like?
I would suggest that you always get out from behind the podium, if possible.
Yes.
Podium really is a barrier between you and the audience, and that you might be able to, in fact, time walking out from behind the podium and approaching the audience at your first key idea. The mere sight of you leaving the mothership and now walking towards them is in and of itself an attention getter.
Yes.
I would get yourself these large index cards. It's basically the size of a regular sheet of paper, folded in half. Get these larger index cards, put little bullet point notes on them as to what it is you want to say, more outline form. I call it GPS directions for your mouth, not a full script. First start. Here's here's the format. Here's the structure. And these cards are great because they anchor your hands where you want them on stage. In fact, if I could just sort of tilt my screen, you want them. You want to hold your cards pretty much against your torso. Okay. You don't want them here, where it's now, this is at the ready for me to read. I want them held against my body, and it anchors my hands in the right spot. Wow. Now, when I want to reference the cards, I'll just pull them away, reference them, and put them back. Okay. If you didn't have anything to hold on to, I'd still want your hands pretty much in this position when you're on stage. And the reason why I like this is because when you go to use your hands, you have a very short distance to work them, to get them in the action, and a short distance to rest them when they're done. If they're down by their sides, it's more of a choreographed gesture, and then they've got a long way to fall to get back to a resting position. So, but the nice thing about the cards is they anchor your hands where they're supposed to be.
And so, that looks, and I think that's great. And we have some chatter here. That doesn't look unprofessional, right? Because it's all about how you carry it. So I think the fact that they're bigger cards, you're holding them professionally, it matters. Like if you have a little card, looks like you're trying to hide it. Your hands are by your sides. Yeah. You seem nervous about it.
And the nice thing is these cards fit perfectly inside the inner breast pocket of most men's jackets. So they're easy to store. You can literally walk on stage, get behind the podium, pull them out easily. When you're at the podium, if you decide you're just not the type to walk the stage and you feel more comfortable behind a podium, what I'd like you to do, instead of flipping pages over when you're done, like that, just literally, after you're done with one, just slide it off to the side on the podium, and now you have a done pile and a read from pile. Just want the whole thing to be as inconspicuous as possible.
Yeah, and being organized. And you could, this is something you could put into a little folio folder as you walk in. Just for those of you asking, you could put it in to anything you carry with yourself professionally, because you should have a pad of paper for these are some questions coming in on Zoom. A legal pad in a little folio, you could pull it out. That's very professional. So it's not, doesn't have to be tricky at all. And
No. And there are basically three things that I think are really important for people to know cold. And that means literally memorized. It's the first line that gets you into the slide. It's the main big idea, takeaway point on each slide. And then what's the concluding line or the segue line that transitions me to the next slide? Because I find that the mushiness and the really boring, non-engaging aspects of most presentations are how people start each slide. Okay, so now if we were to look at this from a so-and-so perspective, that is not the way you start a slide at all. You want to start a slide by saying, trade is the biggest issue facing North America today. a short declarative statement and then build off of it.
I love that. And let me just jump in real quick, because in academic presentations, we talk about burying the lead all the time, which I know is in your book, right? But I'm really happy it was in there, because I think it is the biggest mistake, at least the academics make. We want to tell a story, like we start so slow. We start with the background, like all the stuff that really doesn't matter, hasn't mattered for like 30 years, and then we slowly work to like the last slide, which is the only slide with data that matters, and we give our conclusion, which is the opposite of what you want to do, right? So what do you mean by don't bury the lead?
In the newspaper business, over the years, they work on a system called the inverted pyramid. And the inverted pyramid means that you put your most important stuff right at the top, and then of descending importance, you write the piece. And that's because when they needed to shorten a 2,000 word article to 1,500 words, they didn't go back and rewrite it. They just blocked off the last 500.
Yes.
So if you put your important information in the last 500, it was gone. So that's why a lead in journalism has to be the most important thing, because that's never going to be cut. In presenting for academics, you're going to have the greatest amount of engagement from your audience in the first 15 seconds of what you say. And then you play a game of diminishing returns. So if you put your most important stuff at the 1 minute and 45 second mark of the slide, you may have 15%, 20% of the people still with you. Yes. And they may be chewing on and digesting something you said at the 1 minute mark. Hit them with it right out of the gate, and then explain why or illustrate the point you're making.
Yes, and so I want to go back to I want to stay with the book real quick, and then I want to talk about some of the the best pitches of all time, and especially from the movie business. I have a couple of examples I want to get your take on. But first, from your book, there's something called the Don Draper Principle. I think this is another crucial one that people don't understand the power of it, right? So maybe you can explain what the Don Draper Principle is in terms of controlling the conversation or changing the conversation, and how you can do that very, very easily to take away, really to remove yourself from a difficult conversation, or one where you're going to be explaining or losing, to start it in an area where it's your strength and not a weakness.
I called it the Don Draper Principle because there's a famous line from Mad Men where in the ad business he says, well, if you don't like what's being said, change the conversation.
Yes, exactly.
And in preparing people for media interviews, it's a technique that has long been called bridging, where you are on a road that the other person in the conversation wants to go down, but you realize that road is not fruitful for me. It does not lead me anywhere good. In fact, it probably dead ends in a bad way. So how do I get from the road they want to travel to the road I want to travel on? And that's really literally what's called a bridge. There are three components to a bridge. One of them is validating the point that the other person is making. So let's say you've raised topic A with me, and you want to have this conversation about topic A, and you want to find out what my point of view is on topic A. The validation is something along the lines of, well, there's no question that's getting a lot of attention. In fact, I saw a piece just this morning on it. I think it merits a lot of attention. I think it could go a long way towards deciding X, Y, and Z down the road. What I also think is a critical factor right now in the conversation is this. And so you validate it, and then it's an add-on, it's an addendum to what they're saying, and you're pushing the conversation to the road you want to go down.
So essentially you close the loop for them, like, because they want to get to a place where they get validated, and you do it for them, so now you can move on to the bridge.
Validation, I think, is a hugely important element, because everybody loves to be validated. It throws them off the scent a little bit that you've changed the topic on them. And this is, in media, what typically is missing from the bridge is the validation. Or the worst bridge on earth is, well, I'm not here to talk about that today. What I am here to talk about is, that is the worst possible overt, blunt method of doing it.
Basically, like, be quiet is what you're telling them.
That's right. Or I have no interest in talking about that. I'm going to talk about what I want to talk about.
Great. So that's the first technique, and I know there's two others. What might be one other way besides validating? And this is really important for those of you listening. Think about going on an informational interview or an interview, and you get into territory where maybe it's not your expertise. Instead of like digging your heels in, whatever, you could say, well, I'd love to learn more about that, or that is crucially important and it's something I'm looking into. Whatever it is, if you go with a validation route and you move into it instead of away from it, it can allow you to build that bridge to change the conversation to something you're more comfortable with.
I think one of the biggest mistakes people make is they try to wade through a topic that they don't know anything about.
Yeah.
And the classic mistake they make is, well, the longer I talk, the more convincing I'm going to sound. I'm going to sound like I have actually some knowledge about this, and that is precisely the opposite strategy. Because you were talking about it earlier with Jeanette, in terms of brevity.
Yes.
There's so much wasted time. There's so much wasted productivity because people cannot get to the point. And I sit in on a lot of these meetings and hear a lot of these conversations, and I'm thinking, boy, this 40-minute meeting could have been 25 easily, without even effort, because people just talk in circles and they're incredibly redundant.
Yeah, and a good question to have playing in your head at times, well, number one, prepare, like Bill said, but also be like, do I need to say this? Like, does this,
Yes,
am I making any sense? Am I just talking because you're trying, and as PhDs, we do this all the time. We just keep talking because we're like figuring it out as we say it to ourselves, but that is awful for everybody else.
There's a famous clip from The Office when Michael Scott is admitting, sometimes I start a sentence and I don't even know where it's going. So I just hope I find it along the way. That is also what we coach against. When you open your mouth to convey a thought, you should have a general vision as to what the finish line of that thought looks like. Not in a scripted verbatim way, but generally, here's my beginning, here's my middle, and here's my end. And if you cannot see the finish line by the time you open your mouth to start talking, that's a great indication you're talking too long.
Perfectly said. Very last question.
Shorter, simpler sentences is also a great way. I think these longer, ponderous, paragraph-long thoughts are another great way for academics to just lose the engagement of their audience.
Yeah, everybody very quickly. So on that note of brevity, one thing I read a couple of books early on about pitching yourself for movies, right? Where the stakes are really high. We're talking about $1 million movie pitches. And it's fascinating to me because it applies even to like a elevator pitch for a job interview, etc. Saying something about yourself that people actually will remember in a very short amount of time. In this case, a movie. And the one I always think of, like the most famous one ever, is for Alien. They're pitching the movie Alien in 1981, 1980, and they said it's Jaws in space. 3 words, you immediately get it, very concrete, paid for. A more recent one was Avatar. I think it was Dances with Wolves in space, right? So how can you get better at saying things so simply that they understand? In this case, for the audience here, like, you can say who you are and what you can add to a company, for example, or what you can add to the situation quickly. Like, what would be the process for doing that?
Both of those things are very well crafted analogies, where you compare something that might be unfamiliar to the audience and get them to understand it by comparing something common and familiar to everyone's experience. And so while one of the most famous ones of all time was Colin Powell being asked, so should we go into Iraq and depose Saddam Hussein? And instead of getting into what an academic might do, a really wonky, granular explanation about regime change in the Middle East, and he would have been totally capable of doing that. He said, well, this is the Pottery Barn principle. If you break it, you own it. And what's brilliant about that quote is that nobody understands regime change in the Middle East, but everybody understands going into a store and knocking something over and having to pay for it.
Yes.
So the analogy is a great thing. I had a session the other day where we were talking about an NPS, a Net Promoter Score, which is essentially what companies now use as a barometer as to how well they're doing in customer service. But we were talking to an audience that doesn't know what an NPS is. So what I said to the client was, why don't we say that an NPS is kind of like a company's report card, and if your score is lower than a 6, you probably want to hide it from your parents.
Nice.
So you're taking things that are comparing to something else that everybody gets.
Simpler. Right, and that's a great idea. I mean, so really you're building a bridge from the complex to something simple, right? And
Yeah, and very familiar to everybody.
familiar. Yeah, so the entire audience is going to know what you're talking about because they know, you break it, you buy it. Everybody knows that, but like you said,
That's right.
Gene trained us.
Yeah.
Great conversation, Bill. Thank you very, very much. I do want to say, please check out Bill's book, Pitch Perfect. I'm going to show it here on all screens. Fantastic book on how to pitch yourself. Nothing's more important than communication, and if you break down communication to, the component that really matters during any sort of high-stakes situation, it is the pitch. That's what it's about. It has so much more than we talked about today. Bill, any final thoughts in terms of the book to add, and anywhere else that we can send people? I know you have a lot of things in the works, and you've helped a lot of different people, academics, etc. What's coming up?
We had a very generous and nice Instagram or Snapchat video that Kim Kardashian posted.
Wow.
After our training with her, we were coaching her on how to do this conversation with Steve Forbes for this influential women's summit. And so she leafed through the book. She put a little video up about how much she liked the book. It was very, and we found out firsthand just how influential the.
I was going to say, not a small Instagram account at all.
No. I think that what I often tell clients is that communicating better is an easier thing than learning a new language, playing a new sport, anything, anything like that. Because playing a new musical instrument, because how many times are you going to practice during the week? Once, twice? But we speak all day long on the average of 16,000 words a day. And if you were very intentional about every time you open your mouth for 2 weeks, eliminating your filler language, figuring out how to boil this thought down to its core essence, if you were intentional every time you open your mouth for 2 weeks, you could transform the way you speak.
Fantastic.
In a month.
Great takeaway, and I think that's something we can all practice. As a PhD, you might only be speaking 1,000 words per day in a lab, but we'll work up, because eventually in business you'll be up to that 6,000 level, 16,000 level. So thank you, Bill, very much for your time.
Yeah, thanks very much. Really enjoyed the show.
Really appreciate it. Please thank Bill in the Zoom box. If you're on Facebook or YouTube, wherever you're seeing us stream live, please thank Bill. Go check out his book. We will put the link, once again, we've been putting the link throughout his interview here in all of the chat boxes. Please go check out, Instagram. You can go over to Kim Kardashian. Might be your first time over there, but that's okay. And share that post with the picture of Pitch Perfect, Bill's book. You can also find Bill himself on Twitter and Instagram. Look up Clarity as well. It's definitely something for those of you who are currently in industry jobs at your companies. It might be something you want to mention to some decision makers there. You could introduce them to Clarity, to Bill's work. It's something that you could get a lot of benefit out of. The other technical people at your company could also get a lot of benefits out of working with Clarity too. So thanks again, Bill. And we are going to move on now to our next guest. And as I do so, please, if you haven't yet, thank Bill in the chat box. What a fantastic interview. Learned a lot, and I hope I can put some of those concepts into practice here as I interview our next guest. So who do we have next? We have Tapan up. I'm going to share my screen. Please do me a favor and type in yes in the chat box if you would. If you can see Tapan's smiling face here. So now we're going to bring on a couple of PhDs who have had challenges of their own, especially in terms of communication, what they've had to learn along the way, and how they've applied some of the principles that Bill's talked about without even knowing it, and maybe what they learned from Bill and what they're going to apply moving forward. So I have Tapan on here. Looks like you can all see the screen. Fantastic. Thanks for thanking Bill too. So Tapan completed his PhD in biochemistry and molecular biology at Rutgers University. Recently moved to California for a brand new job as a technical support scientist at Advanced Cell Diagnostics. People who know Tapan say that unlike most academics, or is this academicians? I don't even know if that's a word, Mary. What is this? That is a word. Okay, I just can't say it. Tapan has a rather outgoing personality. Go ahead, you say it.
Academician.
Academician. Learn something new every day. Academician. Okay, he's highly motivated and possesses an infectious enthusiasm, which makes working with him a lot more fun. He's a total team player, always understands what is required of the task at hand, and works with people around him to achieve that goal. Outside of his professional life, Tapan is a team sports enthusiast and volunteers as an umpire for the League of New Jersey and Millennial Cricket League. Tapan, great to see you. We have your LinkedIn profile here. We're going to share in the group. We're going to get you some increased numbers on LinkedIn there, so be ready for that. We call it the hug of death because you're going to have about 100 messages in your inbox, but that's okay. So now that you're in industry, Tapan, how has life changed for you?
Well, thank you for having me here, right here. Nice to see you again. The
Good to
first
see
thing I
you.
would just say is total opposite.
Hold on, Tapan, one sec. Can you hold up your mic a little bit closer to your mouth and speak
Sure.
up? I just want to make sure we're not going to miss this, whatever your thank you is going to be. I'm ready.
Sure. Is it better now?
Yeah, it's better. Thanks.
Okay, cool, sure. So, yeah, as I was saying, it's, to say the least, completely opposite of what I had in academia. It could primarily also be because of the fact that I come from a very small lab doing my PhD. So we just had like a couple of people. Eventually, it was just me and Jack, like a full-time people in the lab for years. So I always miss the fact that I didn't get a chance to work around with people. And that is precisely what is happening now. I'm working with cross collaborative teams. People are really friendly. They're always there to help you with whatever you need. And the fact that I'm getting to work with so many people is something that I always wanted because I'm a people's person. So that way, it's in a lot of ways completely opposite to how I had it in academia.
Fascinating. And so it's quite a bit different, but you're able to leverage skills that you had and maybe didn't even know you had, especially those transferable skills, those communication skills. You know, and since it's the topic of the day, maybe I can just start with how are things different in industry in terms of communication, project management, these kind of things? What have you noticed? So the amount of emails you get, etc.
Sure, yeah. So let's start up with the last part, the emails. There is a gigantic amount of emails that I work with every day since I was but there are ways that you can get organized and things like that. So that's definitely helped. With regards to how it is different in terms of communication, one of the biggest things that I feel is different between academia and industry is in academia, you would rather see people trying to hold back things for sometimes logical reasons where they don't want others to know about what they're doing. But more often than not, they'll not like to share what they're doing or what their findings are with other people and things like that. Whereas in industry, it's the complete opposite. There is no one person in the industry who's going to hold back what they know. People at all the meetings, people like to share what they've learned from their customers, from their projects, or whatever it might be. And so it's really cross collaboration and sharing of the knowledge is immense. I've been sometimes having a hard time to like embrace everything that's been thrown at me in the first couple of weeks, but it's incredible that nobody's holding back anything that they know.
Yeah, and I think I just want to jump in. I think that's amazing because it's kind of the opposite of what we're told in academia. Like you go to industry, everything's very secretive and proprietary, etc. But not on your internal team. Like you want to share things as quickly as possible because communication is such a massive factor. And I think one of the reasons that academia is struggling so much is because there's such decreased communication. You're not speaking 16,000 words a day in academia. We had somebody previously in the private group talk about how they said maybe 1,000 words a day. That's how I got that number when I was talking to Bill. That's a big difference, right? So you're just not used to sharing stuff. You're also a little bit scared that people are going to attack your logic. And, you know, we're much more problem focused in academia, whereas in industry you look for problems, but you also propose solutions and you work together to find those a lot more.
Right. So that's just to make a quick point of that. That's one of the things that I've been really amazed and excited about with my short career in the industry so far is the fact that people value your opinion and they value it so much because they know you have a PhD and they know that you have that thinking, that problem solving skill, and everything that we've learned scientifically during your PhD. So that's one of the things that I really find exciting at my current company, that they value your opinion, whether or not they're going to take your opinion and make it visible handle that, but they're always looking towards your inputs, and they want you to share what you think, what your ideas are, and how do you think with whatever
But
you know.
you're respected. You're respected. And I think that's something we've heard a lot from other people on the show after they've transitioned. They're just like, wait a second, like I walk into a room and people are waiting to hear what I have to say. Like they're not just brushing me off as, another, fish in the bowl or whatever you want to say. It's like you carry weight, and rightfully so. And I think that's fantastic to share. I do want to ask you about your visa situation, because that's something we always have people ask about quite a bit. So what happened in terms of your transition and your visa and getting sponsored, etc.?
Sure. So I think that's been like a big hurdle for a lot of us. I've been seeing a lot of people talk about it, and this is what I would say based on my experience. That issue is there, and the fact is that there's not much you can do about it. So the way I have always tried to look at it is it's an additional challenge that I had to face to go ahead.
Yes.
And so what I've taken it up is it's something that I have to work around to get along, and I'm going to have challenges going forward, no matter whether I'm in the industry or wherever I land up with. So it's just finding a way to tackle yourself with that challenge. So one of the things that I did do, so I did know that the company sponsors visa, if the need be, so that was there.
How did you find out that information? So he said that he knew that the company sponsored people with visas. How did you know that?
A website, I think it's called My Visa Jobs.
My Visa Jobs. So he went to My
Yeah,
Visa
so
Jobs.
you could look up companies, and it will basically tell you how many H-1Bs or green cards has the company sponsored for what kind of positions in the past few years. So I did know offhand. Plus, we also had another CSM member who was already in the team, so that was also really nice.
So you set up an informational interview.
Yes, I did. So she is on the same team as I am. So we have two people from CSA on the team, which is amazing. And
Great.
what I also did with regards to visa, because that's kind of like the dreadful scenario that you don't want to get in. So what I've always tried to do during interviews is try not to get there until I've shown them my value.
Yes.
So the first thing I want to do is I want to sell myself as a candidate for the position and show them that there is nobody better they will be able to find for this position than me.
So how did you communicate that?
So basically, what I did is I during my on-site interview or during my phone interviews before that, what I always did is I made sure that I knew as much as I could about the company,
Yes.
and I knew how my skills are going to help the company go forward. So
Yes.
that was one of the various ways I showed that I could have value, and there are a lot of things that I bring to the table. So that's where the first part comes in, that it's the part of convincing people on the other side that yes, you are a right candidate.
And that's a big part of what Bill said, right? Actually preparing, right? What does the company care about? They care about the company and
Right.
knowing where you fit into that company. So doing that research beforehand, planning ahead, very, very important. And then the follow through, what did it look like on the actual interview? How did you communicate that you were a
So
good
it was,
fit?
I mean, so I think I briefly touched upon this during our previous conversation too. Unlike a lot of people, I have a real outgoing personality.
Yes.
So I never had a hard time going out to ask for help, talk to people. So that's one of the biggest takeaways from my transition, because my transition came through an initiative to schedule an informational interview in response to a marketing email from an account executive.
Yeah, and remind me, how many informational interviews did you set up?
Probably like 80.
80. Okay, so for those of you listening, it's important that change your threshold. You think you have to set up one informational interview? Definitely not enough. You want to set up as many as you can, because you'll get more comfortable. And the more informational interviews you had, the interview, like Tapan said, will not seem very difficult, because at that point, even if you weren't outgoing before, you will be after you've done that many informational interviews. We're running out of time, Tapan. I want to ask you one last question. What would you say is the biggest thing that you learned in your transition, if you could sum it up into one sentence?
So the biggest thing that I've learned is making sure that whatever you say is in sync with what the company is looking for or what that position requires. Because
Absolutely.
I had an issue during the start of my transition where I had interviews and I would kind of beat around the bush and not talk about what is at hand, and I was at loss during those interviews. And I've learned along the way that it's important to stay focused and make sure that you give them the value that they're looking for. Because at the end of the day,
Perfect. Thank you very much, Tapan, for your time. I know you're at work right now, so thank you for joining us. Please thank Tapan in the chat box or wherever you are watching him live. Great insights, and just to kind of recap what he said there, it's exactly what Bill just taught us, right? You want to make sure that what you're saying is in sync with what the company wants. So you have your purpose on one hand, your audience on another. You got to make sure those stay aligned at all times. Stay focused on that. I want to bring on our last guest for the public portion of the radio show now. Lots of guests today, lots of great insights. I'm going to bring on Patricia Silva, who you should be able to see on the screen here. She recently completed her PhD in cellular and molecular interactions at the University of Nice. Patricia, see I said Nice right instead of nice, like most people here in America say at first glance. Patricia also has completed business training, including 2 international programs and the Scientist MBA course through Cheeky Scientist. She has a patent submitted and has extensive volunteer experience, including planning, organizing, and promoting Career Expo Nice 2018, career event for life science graduates. One of Patricia's hobbies is snowboarding. I didn't know that. Where is the snow? In Nice. So Patricia recently accepted a consultant position at Monmouth. I need your help here, Mary, again, right? Was it Monmouth Partners? Monmouth? She's like, no, you got this on your own. All right, so we will, I think I said it right. So we'll put Patricia's LinkedIn link in the chat box for you as well. Hello, Patricia, how are you?
Hello, I'm doing great. Perfect. How are you doing?
You watched the whole show. That's great. So yeah, so please say hi to Patricia in the chat box. Patricia, very excited to have you on. So you've recently transitioned.
Thank you.
How many days ago was the official offer signed?
What day is today? Wednesday. It was 1 week ago.
1 week ago.
Got the news. Yeah.
Congratulations, and you've just been such.
Thank you.
Speaking of communication, you've communicated so well in the private group, and I think you always had a great attitude. You went through the materials, you did the work, and a lot of people can only do one or the other, right? They either can work really hard on what they need to do, or they can have a good attitude. You had both. What would you say helped you the most in your transition related to communication? Like, what was the biggest thing communication-wise that got you the job?
Well, I have to say that in my case, I think I have good communication skills, but that is only true if I'm feeling confident. And I think that's what really helped me in feeling confident in my job search and throughout the whole transition period was that I started early. I started more than almost 1.5 years before I defended my PhD. I'm sorry. When I joined the CSA, it was more than 1 year before. So this really helped me in preparing myself and getting in the right mindset and learning what I needed to learn and improving my CV. So that was very important for me. That was, for me, the most important thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is something Bill talked about was how you carry yourself. It came up in the Show Me the Data section with Jeanette, self-efficacy. So can you describe a little bit what it feels like or how you were able to sense in terms of self-awareness that you were not confident before? Right, so some people are like, I don't know if I think I'm confident, but maybe I'm not. Like, what did that look like? Do you just mean not being prepared, or what else did you mean?
Yes, not being prepared, and for example, just the simple question of someone that is not in science asking me, what do you do? What is your job? And one of the first times I answered this question, I did terribly, and I left thinking, I have to do better than this, and I have to know how to sell what I'm doing and myself and my work. And then I went home thinking, what is the best way to describe anything that anyone asks me? So I think the key is to be prepared, is to anticipate what you have to say or what people may ask you. I think that's key.
Yeah, and I completely agree. And I think where a lot of PhDs struggle is 2 areas, and one's not exclusive to PhDs. Like, you've spent your entire career climbing one mountain, right, in academia, mastering one thing. You're near the top, whether you realize it or not. Once you have a PhD, like, you're near the top of academia. And now you got to get off of that mountain and start at the very bottom of another mountain and learn all this stuff. And it's a new feeling. Like, it's like, we have to wait. I'm totally not confident or prepared in this area. But the solution is the same. You just start climbing, and through practice and preparing, you get better, right? So,
yes.
And I think the second thing that's really specific for PhDs, or where it's the biggest problem, is that we think we can learn this stuff through a book, not through practicing behaviorally. We think we can read something about how communication is important, and then without applying it, without practice, all of a sudden we're great communicators, we're great at interviewing, etc. How important was practice to you in terms of preparation and confidence?
That was very important. You're absolutely right. I didn't feel confident overnight by reading a book, and I did read many articles and many things, but what was more important for me, and I didn't set up as many informational interviews as Tapan, but I had almost 40 informational interviews.
Wow.
And I managed to turn, sometimes when you're at a dinner with friends and I meet someone new that perhaps knows something that I want to know about. Since I was with the right mindset, I managed to turn the conversation to what I needed to know, and I asked the right questions. And it wasn't then just a social interaction, it was me trying to learn more about what they do and about what they want to do. So informational interviews were very, very important for me. And even if they didn't end up in a referral, of course, I didn't have 30 referrals or 40 referrals. That was very important to practice and to learn how to speak about myself and which questions I should ask. And well, people know about all those things. They should know.
No, this is great. So, I mean, again, to be practical with what we learned today, you can read Bill's book on Pitch Perfect, and I do highly recommend it. It's a great book. But that's not enough. Then you have to start applying that through repetition, right? Through changing your threshold of like, oh, maybe instead of 3 informational interviews, I need to do 30. All of a sudden, it just becomes very natural to you. As PhDs, you can get good at anything. You've excelled in one of the most difficult areas of life, right? The cutting edge of technical skills and of STEM. Now you just need to start to learn the basics and get up to even just the 80% level, which you can get to very, very quickly in terms of your growth and understanding curve, in terms of communication, pitching yourself, how to handle yourself in terms of a high stakes discussion. Any last tips, Patricia, in terms of confidence building? Anything that's specific for you that you did that really just helped you in terms of what you would do in terms of your own little process before an interview? How you would gear up, the first question you would ask on an informational interview, any little tips like that?
That's a great question. The way I prepared for most of the interviews was as soon as I would leave one interview, I would go home and type down the answer or the questions that I was asked. And I would think, did I answer this properly?
Wow.
Did I say what I needed to say? And every time I would have another interview, I would go and look at my notes and see, again, all the questions that I was asked and everything that I should keep in mind and what I think I should improve in my answers. I think that was very important for me. Yeah, that's something that everyone should have in their process. Don't just go into an interview thinking, oh, I can already pitch myself. I have a great CV and they called me. It's done deal, because it's not a done deal. You have to keep on working every time.
Absolutely. And follow through, right? Just like we talked about when you network, you meet somebody, write down what you talked about, because it'll make everything downstream, right, that comes next much easier. So great advice, Patricia. Thank you very much for joining us. And congratulations on your recent transition. Thank you. Please thank Patricia in the chat box. Congratulate her. Very, very great to have someone who recently transitioned on. You can see the energy, the excitement, you can see the hard work paying off, and the hard work in terms of communication, in terms of bettering yourself and practicing behaviorally, not just through book learning. Okay, so read the books, but also practice, get better behaviorally. Mary, are we ready for our members only section of the radio show?
Yes, we are.
Yes, we
have
are.
some LinkedIn reviews, some transitions to announce. We have a question from a cheeky.
All right, great. So thank you all for joining us live. Thank you on YouTube for joining us live. We will see you, remember, next Wednesday. Every Wednesday we stream live to YouTube, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you, YouTube. Thank you for watching us on Facebook, for all of you who are here and joined us on the public Facebook